Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci of CFL Talk, Leaf Talk, Candid Frank Live, and we're going to do all three of them in this episode. So thank you for joining us. It's a bit of a surprise programming note. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV channel 250. Please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure you rate and leave a comment. Both apps are absolutely free.
How's it going?
Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire TV sticks, Roku sticks, and also Smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me is David Morassutti. David, normally we talk CFL. We'll do that. We'll still talk CFL. I guess, I don't know. What do you think the biggest story in the CFL this week is?
Oh, games are back.
That's the story. There's one going on while we talk.
Yep, we got the Banjo Bowl,
The
preseason Banjo Bowl.
Preseason Banjo Bowl. It's 15-6 Saskatchewan right now in the third quarter.
Saskatchewan's going to the Grey Cup, everybody.
Yes, they are. If they buy a ticket like everybody. No, just kidding.
Big note in this one. Chris Streveler's returned to the CFL.
Yeah.
He
Now
got the start.
Now this game right now, it has Streveler's playing quarterback. He's had 7 of 8, 65 yards, no interceptions, average of 8.1 yards. They also have put in Eric Berrier. Saskatchewan is countering with Trevor Harris, who's 7 of 9, almost identical. Shea Patterson, but they haven't used Antonio Pipkin just yet, who's been around the horn in the Canadian Football League.
Yeah, he short yardage quarterbacks always find a way to stay in there.
AJ Ouellette has carried the ball 6 times for 18 yards. That's an average for you math specialists out there of 3 yards a carry. It is exhibition. I don't think, you expect with his signing that he would do a little better, but this is an exhibition game. This is him looking, seeing the behinds of a whole different set of guys.
Yeah, it's all new for him, right? He's got to work with a new offensive line. He's got to work with a different quarterback. Everything there is so different for running backs, right? It's not plug and play in a lot of cases. So it doesn't surprise me, and I'm sure they're also, not going too hard with him, right? They don't want to throw too much at him in his first in preseason. You want to avoid injuries with these guys.
He's in there, I think, just to impress the fans. If you were to ask me, I mean, he's there because the fans will want to see him. They'll cheer him on right away. Give him a bit of that, that mosaic feeling, because they are playing in Saskatchewan. So
yeah, give the home fans a reason to go.
Yeah, absolutely, and have a look at one of their new prized possessions, one of their new prized toys, if we can refer to a human being as a prize or a toy. But it is a game. So that game right now is going on. I think another thing is, if we remember, not only did the head coach Ryan Dinwiddie come from Calgary, they brought Arbuckle from Calgary. We all thought, I don't know about you, but I'll say I thought that would be a good match, together. They knew each other and all that kind of stuff. And it didn't work out that way. What's going to make this time different for the Argonauts and Arbuckle?
I think the expectation, right? He came to Toronto with the expectation he was going to be the starting quarterback. That's not what this is, in my opinion. This is more of, we don't have a veteran, right? Last year, there was always this, they don't really have a veteran quarterback in case Chad Kelly doesn't do well, and you got very inexperienced guys behind him. Chad Kelly's not there. You got 2 young, inexperienced quarterbacks. Cameron Dukes only has 2 CFL starts to his name. Having Nick Arbuckle there accomplishes a couple things. One, you have that safety net of a backup, or third, even if I think there could be a competition for the backup job if they don't feel Brian Scott's doing enough. And they already got rid of another quarterback from camp, so they needed a third quarterback just even for that reason. But I think it's for Nick Arbuckle, you go in there, you know the system, you know what Ryan Dinwiddie's expectations are. He'll probably get some preseason action as well. And you know what? Maybe just gets himself on the roster while we have this uncertainty of what's going on with Chad Kelly.
Wasn't Franklin? I'm trying to remember now because this all of a sudden dawned into my head. Wasn't Franklin with the Argos at the same time Dinwiddie was the first
No,
year?
no, no.
No, you
So
sure?
Franklin was 2018 or 2019. I want to say it was in that period, and that was when Chamberlain was the head coach after
Right.
Trestman. It was Trestman first, then it was Corey Chamberlain. Brett McLeod Bethel Thompson was the 1A 1B sort of situation
Mhm.
there. Then they traded Arbuckle, and Arbuckle joined the Argos in 2021 because remember 2020 was supposed to be in Ottawa. Then and the Argos had Nichols. Then Nichols decided he didn't want there was an issue with the contract, so Arbuckle got released, Nichols got released.
They
Things
got
got kind
swapped.
of weird
Swapped.
there. And then Arbuckle came to Toronto. He played okay. Then he got hurt. Then he never really got himself back to where he needed to be. McLeod Bethel Thompson won the starting job. They traded Arbuckle to Edmonton to get the rights to Chad Kelly and a draft pick. And now Arbuckle's back.
Right. The point is, the quarterbacking position with the Toronto Argonauts for the past 4. I'm sorry, I keep getting confused because of the pandemic and the lost
Right.
season.
Yeah,
But
the lost
the,
season
the,
doesn't
the
help with
point
all
is
that.
the point is for the last 4 or so years, you can either add the pandemic year or subtract it. Do as you please. It has never been a situation where they've gone to camp except for last year, which it ended up at the end of the season becoming what I'll call a typical Argonaut season, where they have a quarterback that's going to be the number one quarterback, and he doesn't end up being the number one quarterback. Now, the Grey Cup season for the Argos wasn't because the job was taken away from Macbeth. It was an injury that happened and basically led to the ordaining, I guess, of their new starting quarterback. Right? We all saw that, and everybody read the tea leaves that there was a good chance that Kelly was going to be the starter. At least it could very well be a good battle between the two to see who's the starter the following year. So the Argos aren't under Kelly and or Pinball are not afraid to change horses in midstream as far as quarterbacks are concerned. In fact, I think it goes with every position. The Argos, I think, more than any other team, really are a meritocracy. You can end up in the position of playing for the Argonauts if you show them that you can do it. If you're ready when you get the opportunity, you could end up keeping that up. The Rookie of the Year last year is a perfect example of how things work with the Toronto Argonauts.
Oh man, the Argos. There's just so much because the quarterback situation became the dominant subject. Not really got much talked about the rest of the roster and the changes there. Right? We just talked about AJ Willett. We haven't really talked about the guy who's replacing AJ Willett and Kadeem Carey and Dan Adebaboye, kind of the running back
I
by
like
committee.
Adebaboye. If he
Yeah,
hadn't got hurt last year, the Argos would have had a better chance to win that
yeah,
East.
because they didn't have a run game. I mean,
Zero.
AJ Willett got hurt. Didn't have Adebaboye. They really
Concussion.
didn't have a running game. And then the defense, when McManus is back, their defensive line looks very good as usual. The secondary is very different. You're going to see a younger, less experienced secondary, but one I think that has a lot of potential. And then obviously the changes in the personnel, right? You got co-defensive coordinators. It looks like Kevin Iben is going to be kind of the lead in terms of play calling, which he kind of was already doing, right? I mean, Chamberlain had the game plan, but I think Iben learned a lot being under Corey Mace for a year. So, and he's also got so many years of experience as a defensive coach. So
Well,
there's a
he's
lot,
patiently waited for a good opportunity like this, right?
of course, right? And I thought maybe it would have been earlier. You would have expected this, but I think Chamberlain was just there was such a body of work behind his time in Calgary that Dinwiddie really liked, and it made a lot of sense. So I'm curious to see how that all shakes out. I think the defense of the Argos hasn't really gotten the attention it deserves. I think, yeah, they lost a lot of players, no doubt about it. But I talked to Ryan Dinwiddie last week, and he liked what the defense has to offer. A lot of guys left, but they brought in some guys, and they went younger. And I think that's, yeah, experience is good, right? It's always good to have experience, but it's another thing to have some good athletes as well on that
You have to
on
have
that defense.
cap-friendly players. You
Exactly.
know, there is no and, if, or but, because for every dollar you spend on a veteran, that's a less dollar you have to spend on another veteran. Because the way it works is you have to have guys that aren't paid that much on the team, who have something to prove or are willing to take a hit for the home team hit. So the Argos do that well. Actually, we've seen players, David, in these past few, under Dinwiddie, since we're talking about him as a head coach. He has really created a situation where young players who have no reputation get a chance to do something. He's been really good at that. His staff has been really good at that, and the Argos have been pretty good at that. One thing that they've lost their assistant general manager, who's gone to the Buffalo Bills.
Big
While
loss.
Vince Magri, he's somebody that very quietly. It's funny, really, when you think about it. The big name in GM is Pinball Clemens, but he has some guys that really know the game really well. Vince, as a scout, has done a great job, and I think he'll be a loss they feel.
I do. He built their Canadian depth, especially through the draft. Quantez Stiggers, he's the one that kind of took point on that transaction to bring him to Toronto. And he's, yeah, his ability to evaluate talent is, probably one of the better ones in the league that's kind of emerged. And he's been doing it for the last few years. He was a little more under the radar when he was first in Toronto. Then obviously he got the promotion to assistant general manager, and that kind of sped up the process a little bit more. But look, you get an opportunity to work in the NFL, you're taking it, right?
Absolutely,
Very,
absolutely.
very deserving. I spoke to him actually after it, and he was very, very appreciative of his time in Toronto, and he's very excited for what comes next.
Yeah, he's done a lot of great things. He's got an excellent. I think we can support the idea that he's done a lot of great work here, and we wish him all the best. And he'll be missed. The question is, they lost their defensive coordinator from last year. Now they've lost a guy that does a lot of the grunt work for making sure we have Canadian talent. To question here in Toronto. He's done a great job there. And they don't have their. We've just reviewed a few things. They don't have their number one quarterback, forcing them to go and try once again with Nick Arbuckle. What does that all add up to you? Do you think the Argos have a slow start? I'll say what I think. I think they'll have a slow start because they're really going to be in a rebuild mode. Rebuild the defensive coaching, rebuild some scouting, and then the scouting part we won't feel, we won't see it as soon, but still it'll eventually be an issue because it's a very supportive to the building of a team. And then you've got a quarterback that didn't quite cut it back in the day, and he's back. There's a lot of adjustments that are going to have to be done by the Argonauts.
Here's one thing. I still think they're going to be a top 3 team in this. They're battling for second with everything that's gone on. Montreal has a lot of its core returning. Toronto's in a fight for second right now, based on how their roster looks right now. And then what I think is you're going to see a team that's going to scrap together wins. They could surprise. Look, the offense has still got almost everything back. Their offensive line is a top offensive line in the league. Nothing
Which
changed,
doesn't help a quarterback, which helps a
which
quarterback.
helps a young quarterback. Cameron Dukes, he's going to have to play within himself and not try to do too much. I think this is going to be Ryan Dinwiddie's biggest challenge But if he keeps this team in a position to be a top team in the East, might be even more impressive than what they did last year. Because last year they had a lot of veterans, a lot of guys that came back from the Grey Cup. That continuity kind of carried over. This year, because of all the changes, it's going to be a harder coaching job, and I'm very curious to see how that all kind of works out.
So essentially, what we're talking about here is, I agree with you. I believe the Argos can be in the playoff picture. The real question is going to be whether they can be better than Ottawa and better than or equal, I guess is the fair way to put it, with the fourth place Western team, right? Because if they're equal to the fourth place Western team in points, they get in. So essentially, I think the big challenge for the Argonauts going in, whether they say it in the locker room or not, but from my perspective, the challenge is going to be to make the playoffs.
They'll make the playoffs. Yeah, it's just going to be it's gonna be a challenge, right? Like I think this year you're not gonna see a team go. I mean, look, I'm gonna eat my words because it's probably gonna happen after he says you're not gonna see a team go 15-3, 16-2. You're not gonna see that dominance. I think this year in the CFL. I think there were
14 is probably the number that a team's going to finish first with.
Yeah, I think so. 13-14 for sure.
So we've got. I think we both agree that Montreal is the favorite as far as, they're the champs, right? They're the ones you have to beat them to prove you're better than them. So right now they're the defending champs, and that they deserve a lot of respect. After all, the Argos won the Grey Cup and came back with that amazing season last year. So history would suggest that Montreal is quite capable of doing the same thing and having a great regular season after an amazing Grey Cup.
Yeah, I think so. No,
So
that. Mm-hmm.
That train and the physicality of Montreal is something that I don't know. Do you think? I know Hamilton's trying to be physical. They're trying to be younger and more physical, right? I think that's because they know what they're up against with Montreal. And I'm wondering, do you think the Argos can come up with a little more physicality? They don't have the brutal running back that they had last year. He's in Saskatchewan. We talked about him already. Kadeem Carey he's not a bull, right? He's a finesse runner.
Yeah. He's not viewed much as like a AJ Willett where he's going to run through guys. He's a bounce to the outside runner. But Dan Boboye is very much a power runner. He's got physicality and toughness to him. So I do think, you're going to see a lot of that.
Yeah, I think this is his year. Adetoboye, I'm not really sure that he wouldn't.
He's my dark horse. If you're looking for like a most outstanding Canadian nominee for the Argos, he's my dark horse candidate this year. If he can play to how I think he can play, he should be up there as one of the top running backs in the CFL.
He should be, and he'll be an important. After all, when he did get a chance to play, he proved to be an asset, a major asset. He was really trending in my mind when we were watching him those last few games of the season. I'm going, God, this guy's going to be good in the playoffs, because he's younger and hungrier, I think, than a lot of players. He's a guy who's patiently sat in the background waiting for his chance.
Yeah, no, but that's the way it goes in the CFL, right? You need to be comfortable with what you have internally in a lot of these cases, and not go and feel like you have to, blow out your budget to go and sign a running back. Like they didn't get Kadeem Carey for pennies on the dollar, but they also didn't go out and spend a lot of money, replacing a need. Like I think he came cheaper than Willett did, and I think that helped.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm curious to see how that all kind of shapes out. But I think yeah, there's a lot of reasons for the Argos fans to be. I'm okay to say that the Argos are going to be fine, but I'm not going to be like, oh, first Nice is going to be a cakewalk for them. That's not going to be the case.
Well, I'm glad you see it that way. I got to say though, the Argos, the Kelly situation. We can talk about it now to the extent that things have changed, where he's decided to publicly say that he needs to earn his position back. The Argos have given in to the fact that maybe it was a bad look to have him practicing. So now he's stepped away from the team. If there's a good news, bad news at quarterback, David, I think the bad news is they lost their starting quarterback. The good news is they lost him before training camp, which
Mhm.
means that whoever has to take over from him has a little more running room to get ready for a season. So if they've got the right guy, it's not the best situation to fill those shoes, but at least they know from the beginning before the season even starts to get a running start to having a good season. So they get, this is better than if the Argos lost Kelly in game 1.
Yeah, and that's what Dinwiddie kind of said to me was he said I'm treating this like an injury. That's how you have to treat this the Kelly
Absolutely.
absence. Quarterbacks go down. Trevor Harris went down last year. Obviously, Saskatchewan. It was during the season that didn't really help their cause. But that's how they have to treat this because you cannot just say you know what, we're gonna plan for him to come back because you can't. You have to treat it like an injury in one of those like we don't know if when he'll come back or if he'll come back. But if he does, we'll figure that out when we have to cross that bridge. We don't even know if he's going to appeal the suspension. That's the biggest thing right now. We don't know if he's going to appeal it because he's just taking time away. And I think he wants to get that document, that his representation wants to get the document to see if they actually need to challenge the suspension.
Yeah, if there's room, based on facts, decide whether there may be another side of the story. Uh, that's the way these things go. So in We've talked about the defense, we've talked about the change, we've talked about the offensive line giving whoever's behind center or under center an opportunity to play really well. We've talked about the running back situation. The receivers they lost one Canadian, but they were pretty flush in Canadian receivers.
Oh yeah, like that's their bread and butters. They got I think between 3 or 4 quality Canadian receivers. Now, are they top of the line Canadian guys? Debatable, but they also have good veterans. Tavares Daniels, DeMonte Coxey. People forget Rasheed Bailey played for Winnipeg. Good, good, valuable addition that they brought there. Like their receiving core is good enough that's going to really make a difference for their offense. You got very sure-handed guys. You got some good young pieces behind them too, and good Canadian again guys that you can start at as a Canadian receiver. It makes such a difference when you do your ratios for sure.
And they've got a former NFL CFL kicker.
Yeah. Hyralahu. So they said they would be able to use a designated import spot on like if they wanted to bring Deonta McMahon, if they want to put him on the roster, not to worry about they can make Dan Abuboye a starting running back as a Canadian. It makes such a difference when you have that good Canadian talent. And again, that's what Vince Magri did. Found quality Canadian talent that can start. Not just play, but can start.
Can yeah, not be a placeholder, not a
Mhm.
guy, a replace holder. Yeah, so this is going to be interesting to say. And who's back after being here for a while, and it's going to be interesting. That's for sure with him at kicking. Um, let's talk a little bit about the opposition that the Argos are up against. We talked a little bit about Montreal. We talked about them being defending champs. The physicality that they play. This is a team that, considering they won a Grey Cup, they really didn't make that many changes, David, which is why I think both of us agree that they're going to be a tough team to beat in the Eastern Division, even when they go over and play the West.
Mm-hmm. I know that those are always the tough games, right? But the gap's closed, I think, between the East and the West. I think you're starting to see that close. Like how I think when you look at Montreal, they play the West very well. Hamilton got a few key wins against the West last year. That in Toronto, I mean, we already know Toronto's 2 losses came against West teams. If you remember, Winnipeg and Calgary. I think you're going to see a difference this year. I think you might even see some West teams look as bad as East teams this year.
Which team? Edmonton? I
Calgary.
guess to start. You think Calgary's going to do that? Finally,
I think Calgary's going to be one of the
off the list.
I think Calgary's going to be one of the worst teams in the CFL this year.
Wow.
They did nothing in this offseason that made me excited and hopeful that they can kind of turn things around. Now they had a learning year last year, so maybe they feel that they can turn things around that way. But nothing there I liked from Calgary. Even Ottawa got a new quarterback. Ottawa made some changes. They added to their defense. There's a lot I think I prefer from what I've seen from the East teams, especially versus what the West teams are doing.
Well, we know that Edmonton's got something to prove.
Of course,
there's no doubt about that. And the fans there, have been very patient with the team, as patient as Ottawa's fans have been over the past couple of years. We'll see what they can do. Now, we do know if we can work on the other side of the equation, which is the better teams. Winnipeg, they haven't really lost any players, and I think they still have the ability to lead that division. But I really think Saskatchewan's going to be the team that's going to determine who finishes first. And it's going to come down to the question of whether they can play the way their coach needs them to play. There's going to be a little bit of a growing pain, I think, in Saskatchewan with the head coaching. It's a bit of a new experience. But I do think they've got a great head coach, and the running game is going to be an issue. I think. I'm not sure. We'll see. The last few games that he's played haven't been that great. Even with the Argos, the West Eastern Division final, and that. So, they've got some questions to answer, but I think they're a good bet to compete with Winnipeg, and then. Then you've got BC that could be either first, second, or third, no problem, depending on how good the other two teams are.
Yeah, I'm looking at that West Conference, and I'm like, Edmonton's going to be better. Saskatchewan's going to be better. Winnipeg stayed kind of the same. Like they lose Jeff Coate, but they still got Willie Jefferson. He's still a mean bully. Their offensive line took a little bit of a hit. Like BC's a team I'm curious if they can sustain what they did last year. They did well with Vernon Adams. I think they're going to be in the mix. I think Saskatchewan, I think a lot of people like them as first. And I always say until Winnipeg takes a step back, tough to go against them. So I still think it's going to be Winnipeg, Saskatchewan, BC, then Edmonton.
Yeah, I'm not as secure in the knowledge that Winnipeg will finish first as much as Montreal will finish first. To your point, because they're a team that they've really hung on there really well. But I really do think that with BC hosting the Grey Cup and with Saskatchewan making the changes that they made, they're going to really be breathing down Winnipeg's heels.
Oh yeah, I think Winnipeg should not feel comfortable this year at all.
Not for a second. We've got we're waiting to see. There've been a couple of new rules brought. We'll talk about them next week because I wanted to split this show into Candid Frank Live, Leaf Talk as well. And here, because we're Toronto centric here, what we've seen in Toronto has been, boy, has it been a strange year. And what triggered me was the PWHL lost by the Toronto team. Spooner gets injured. That team goes under to Minnesota. That was a surprise to me because I thought maybe they had a little more depth than it appears that they had.
Yeah, I when you lose a Natalie Spooner, very tough. Like she was the best forward in the PWHL, for God's sake. Like that's like losing. I guess I can say it's like losing Connor if the Oilers were to not have Connor McDavid. Now they have other good players, right? But that you're missing that elite top player on your team. PWHL is very different in that regard because of the way that those teams are structured, right? And there's a lot of attention put on those top end players. Yeah, it was very disappointing. What was more disappointing wasn't the loss, that like their last loss. It was very Toronto fashion. You had a 2-0 series lead. You could have ended that series and swept. But again, and it's a best of 5. You lose one. I mean, the Jays found that out too. You lose one game in that best of 5 when you're up. The other team's like, just need to win one more and put the pressure on them. I think that's what happened there. The pressure got put on Toronto. Like every Toronto team. I mean, again, this is a little, I guess maybe a little bit of a different situation because it's a brand new team. But just like every team nowadays, I don't even think it's just a Toronto thing. I think a lot of teams nowadays, the pressure, they're really, really struggling to deal with that pressure when you have the lead, which is very, very strange because we see all the numbers of how good teams are when they have 2-0 series leads or 3-0 series leads. It means as a lot less than they used to.
Yeah, and I just believe that the PWHL and women's hockey, I don't think that it highlights that maybe I didn't suspect it. I didn't believe it was true, but maybe there just isn't enough depth right now in the PWHL. You know what I mean? That if you lose a star player, a team can't recover. They were a totally different team once she got hurt, and that surprised me more than anything.
Yeah, I know. It's really tough. When you're in those situations, I do agree. Yeah, I that one it's just befuddling, really, when you think about it.
Well, they
In
were
my
extremely dominating during the season. They had a
Yeah,
slow start, if I remember correctly. They
they
had a
had a
slow
slow
start.
start, and then they went on a big run, right?
Absolutely, after the slow start, and they became dominant, that
Like they
things
couldn't
turned around for them.
score. I remember they couldn't score a goal to save their life. Really, they were struggling offensively. Then it kind of just exploded.
And Spooner became an offensive dynamo.
It's like they were a true Toronto team.
Well,
Really
the
struggling out of the
conversations about
gate.
Toronto teams, the curse of Toronto teams, I saw a couple of people post the fact that Toronto sports teams are cursed, and this fit into that definition because they just weren't a team that should have lost 3 in a row. They just weren't that kind of team.
No, no, they weren't. Again, if Natalie Spooner's playing, that series doesn't end in 5 games. That series would have been over, in my opinion. She
Yeah,
means that much to that team. People will say, "Oh, how can you say that?" You take Marie-Philippe Poulin off of Team Canada. Her nickname was Captain Clutch because
absolutely.
every single game that meant something, she scored.
Yeah,
Not
she earned
one
that
goal
moniker.
sometimes, 2 goals. And it wasn't just the opening goal, it was the late goal to help seal a win or win it in overtime. That's I think the difference with women's hockey women versus
Maybe
men's
that's what it
hockey.
is. Maybe just don't have as much depth as,
They
as
don't have the depth isn't really there, but the star power is really what pushes teams forward.
which, you know, yeah, the hockey was awesome. It was great hockey. They've improved so much over the years. I had the privilege of calling, at that time it was basically OCAA Ontario colleges, and I had a chance to do the Seneca Braves, and they had Angela on there, and an amazing she was an amazing talent. But the difference between her and the rest of the players is a lot different than the best player today is. So the depth has improved. It's just not there yet where a team can overcome the loss of a star player. I guess I believe a good example, a good comparison would be another Toronto team. Spooner was lost to the Toronto team in the PWHL. Austin Matthews was lost, to the Leafs in the NHL. And I'm not saying the team wasn't as good, but there was enough talent around the Toronto Maple Leaf team that they could raise the level of play of the rest of the players to basically nullify the loss of Austin Matthews. And they did it. So, that's what it's too bad that didn't happen for Toronto in the PWHL playoffs. It is what it is. Let's move over to the Toronto Blue Jays. I got tickets for them coming up in August, and I'm looking forward to going. But they have been hard to watch. They've had a couple of really good games here now in the last couple of days, but before that, they were hard to watch. David, have you had a chance to watch them and get a sense of what they do? I know you're a busy reporter at Sportsnet, and you're writing a lot of stuff that isn't baseball. But have you had a chance? I know you've gone to a few games the past few years, so you do have enough interest that you do follow them that way.
I was offered tickets, or accepted tickets for the opening game of the series were against the Dodgers because Shohei's in town. You really get a good chance. You get a chance to see the best player in baseball. You take that opportunity. So that's what I did. The Blue Jays lost 12-2. The Blue Jays, I've never seen a Blue Jays team look so bad offensively. Today, Danny Jansen, Dalton Varsho stepped up.
Barrios,
right? Bo Bichette played a lot better.
4 for 4.
This team will go as far as Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. take them. George Springer was better, right? But that's been the problem. They haven't been good enough, consistently enough. And the big issue has been up top. Everyone wants to blame the manager.
Yeah.
Again, he takes control of the batting order. I get that. But it's the management that has allowed everything to get so stale. Ever since that loss to the Mariners, where they were up 8-0,
yes,
and they had that full collapse, they decided to do a big change where they got rid of Teoscar Hernandez and they brought in Eric Swanson, and they made all these little moves and things like that. But then look at the fact that they scored 8 runs, but they didn't score any afterwards either. George Springer got hurt. The defense, everything kind of got into shambles. But the timely hitting has never really been there because the mechanics haven't been there. But this front office has been so complacent. They haven't been, again, they're like, we believe in the group. We believe in the talent. Well, nothing that this group has done over the last year should give any reason to believe in them, unfortunately. Like, I still believe if you had to ask me today, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., I have a lot more faith that he can be a big part of this team's success. I think so. George Springer shouldn't be around anymore. He makes too much money and does not really help your team very much for what he's being paid for. And they're trying to nickel and dime while the Yankees go out and get Juan Soto.
Mm-hmm.
The Yankees realize we need to really augment our lineup, and they go and get one of the better, hitters, left-handed hitters in baseball. Again, I understand the whole Ohtani situation, but if you're banking on Ohtani, that's a tough one. But again, I feel like there is too much complacency. It's a Toronto thing. It's not just a Blue Jays thing, but I do feel like that's been an issue, and they haven't been able to step up, and they've been in such a funk that they're losing confidence very harshly I hate to say that, but it's true.
Yeah, no, they have, and the biggest thing that you said there that's really important, they've been unable over the years to get key hits, key runs. They leave too many men on base consistently without, I don't have the stats that can tell you where they stand in the league as far as leaving men on base, but I can tell
Mhm.
you from watching the games and getting a feel for the game, not statistically, but at least get a feel for the game the way I've always watched baseball. Never been a statistic hound. It
Mhm.
doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like they have. You call it confidence. Yeah, that's a good word to use. I just don't think they have the execution to meet the situation. And there's different ways of winning a baseball game. And there's a complement of ways to win. You can do it with some late inning pitching, late inning hitting, late inning defense. All these things can bring you to win. The Jays, it seems to always come down to they need that hit. They've got to do it. They've got to do it various ways. And the biggest thing I can say that I can say about the Jays, and you talked about the Yankees and all that money that the Yankees spend. The Jays are a team that are caught in between they being the Baltimore Orioles or the New York Yankees. They're halfway in with both, right? Um, you know, Bringing in guys that maybe will fit in and are great players on the verge of being great, whether they be young, whether they be older, who've been in a bad situation or not in a great situation. Where if they come to the Jays, these guys will make a difference. That kind of thing. The Jays have gambled on players and have spent money. They've spent money, but it hasn't worked out well for them, David. They haven't hit on players. I mean, they had a great young pitcher who pitched yesterday and won. They didn't handle his, I don't know, his mental issues. He made a mistake last year, said something, it went public. Somebody tore a strip off him, and next thing you know, Alex Manoah is in the minors. The Jays, just their management team has not been able to protect him as a player or protect the players they've signed to give them a good enough support so that those players had some success.
Yeah, I mean, look, they always talk about insulating the lineup, right? And I think people don't understand really what that means to insulate a lineup. That just means that pitchers have to look at attacking elsewhere in the lineup and not just two players, three players. They got to figure out the rest of the lineup too, and that's been the Blue Jays' problem. The depth really hasn't been there. Um, in terms of the lineup, the pitching too. I mean, when you lose, when Manoah didn't have a good bounce back the way they had wanted to, and was obviously injured to start the year, that creates more chaos than and they had to put guys in situations they shouldn't have been in. Kevin Gossman just said today that you know he shouldn't have been rushing himself back to the lineup, and he should have been taking more time to get himself ready. And then he said, but we didn't have the depth to really handle that. And I felt maybe it made it seem like he was pressured to come back earlier than he should have been. And that's another issue there too. Yeah, you're not going to have a Kevin Gosman ready in the wings if someone gets hurt. But the one thing that every manager should be able to do is manage
Pitching
um,
staff, yep.
your depth, making sure that if you got an injury to, which happens all the time in baseball, that you're not rushing guys back when they shouldn't need to be rushed back. I understand they were kind of mounting and every team is dealing with it right now. But that's something that, again, up top, that's something that they can address. That's a management thing. That's not just a players thing.
Absolutely. We only got a couple of minutes left. We got a couple other teams I'd like to talk to, and very quickly, I'll say the Raptors. Siakam now is in the conference final. The Raptors have been they're a tear down. They've decided to tear things down. There's not much we can say about that. And then I'd like to talk about the Leafs, and as far as the coaching's concerned. After I mention this comment, you're a TFC you're a TFC fan. Bernardeschi has played the way I think TFC had hoped he played before. And they are an example of how Toronto teams need to be, and that is their star players have to be stars. And when
Mhm.
Bernardeschi is a star and Insigne is a star, that team can play well, and they find themselves in the hunt for a playoff spot.
I mean, you get a new coach that puts the star players in a position to succeed. Stars were frustrated last year. There's fights within the locker room, fights with the coach. The culture needed a reset. John Herman has provided that, and the players have really gravitated towards towards this new style, the way that Herman wants them to play. Bernardeschi scores a hat trick against Montreal.
Wow.
That's what he was brought in to do. Now, Lorenzo Insigne, I understand he's an older player. He's dealt with a lot of injuries, very unfortunate. But John Herman realizes that, and he's not going to overplay him. He's not going to put him in a position where he's doing too much, and it's worked out. Right? I really enjoyed this TFC team has really been galvanized. Now, are they a top tier team in the league? I think it's still left to be seen. I think they still have a little work to go. But is it miles ahead different than what it was last year? This was a team you could not watch. It
Seven
was
and
very.
six, playoff spot in hand.
Mhm.
They look like they're playing well, like a team, and that hat trick and that game that TFC played was after a horrendous emotional um, experience, right? With suspensions, the whole thing, right? So that was a great, I guess, I think fair to say, David, a good reaction game to bad circumstances they were trying to overcome.
Yeah, I think so. I think when you go through such a tough season, you're willing to make change. I think the players have embraced the change, and that's a good thing. It shows us how invested they are. This is the difference with soccer or football players. Don't want to. I don't want anyone to get mad. Take the wrong term. But they when they invest in a project, they want to do what it takes to succeed, and they understand. Look, Bernardeschi and Insigne both came from. I mean, look, they were brought in because they understand what it takes for a team to be successful. What a team needs to do, not individuals. How to do it as a team.
But
They-
have the individuals that are very good. Look at Miami,
I know. I mean,
right?
you get a little too fixated on Messi sometimes, but he galvanizes the rest of the roster. He sets the example, and the rest of them follow. And that's what
Absolutely.
Toronto needs from their guys too.
Absolutely. That's just it. Your star players have to be stars. That's all up and down every Toronto franchise. The ones that the teams that have players, and we'll talk finally with the last minute or two that we have about the Toronto Maple Leafs. Real quick, they I'll say this about the Toronto Maple Leafs, and going back 4 or 5 years, I was never I never did support Dubas as the GM because I felt Toronto deserved an experienced GM. Keith turned out into being a pretty good coach, but unfortunately, he learned on the job to be an NHL coach. I never believed in Toronto being a team that should use or have a coach with no experience. And under the circumstances, they had players that didn't have experience. So you had a general manager with no experience, a roster of players with incredible talent with no experience, and then you have a coach with no experience. What happened to the Leafs in the past few years was not a surprise to me.
It's as they say, you don't want the Leafs GM or coach position to be a learn on the fly type of job.
Nope.
It's not really. John
Not in this
Ferguson,
environment that
John
Toronto has.
Ferguson Jr. found that out very hard too. It's not
Oh,
the
yeah,
first time the Leafs have done this,
exactly. Gord
and I
Stellick.
think that's why that's why they went the direction they did with Craig Berube.
Absolutely.
Experience, guys who've been there. They tried. Now, look, granted, they tried to do it when they brought in Mike Babcock, but the fit, what he did, it didn't vibe with what the current generation of players do. It did with the previous, but not the current generation.
Admit.
But at the same time, yeah, I think they tried it with the Lamoriello Babcock together, but I feel like there wasn't symmetry with what was happening up
It
top.
was an
And
organization with very little experience from top to bottom, David.
yeah,
And how it ended up did not surprise me. I had these conversations, and I was basically, um, I don't know. I felt like I was in the wilderness. And it played out the way I had not hoped, because I'm a big fan of Toronto sports teams for the benefit of Toronto sports fans. I'm a
mm,
long existing Toronto sports fan, and I might not be as supportive for each team as maybe some people should want me to be, but what I am is an observer of the way Toronto has been, and with the Leafs, it's a long and an arduous time. The Blue Jays next to them, next to the Leafs, about the same thing. And because we cover the Argos so closely, we've had the opportunities to see champion. Both of us have had opportunities, even while we're
mm,
working together, to see a championship team in Toronto a couple of times.
yeah,
And the frustration is that Toronto fans, I think, I'm not going to say they're cursed, but they have things that the organizations have done that, if you can't see it coming, like I saw the Leaf thing coming, at least turn around and have a look and ask yourself what's gone wrong. And at the end of the day, the Leafs now, I don't know if it's going to be too little or too late. That's the problem with the Leafs as far as I'm concerned. Will it be too little, too late? It is, in the sense that Marner has a year left in a contract that can't be followed up with an equal contract, I don't think. I don't know what they're going to do to accommodate that kind of salary after this contract's done.
hmm, we'll see.
It'll be interesting, to say the least. Um, Fun it will be. Your final word on the Maple Leafs. Do you think they can re-sign Marner?
I don't think they should, but we can leave that conversation for a different day.
Absolutely. Thanks for doing this, David.
No problem, Frank.
He's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching CFL, Leaf, football, soccer. We covered everything today. Here Mondays at normally at 6 p.m. The show can also be heard at the Spanglish World Radio Network. For other shows like this one, you can watch. You can join the SpanglishWorld.ca and check us out. You can watch it, hear it, read it, download, and live it. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks for watching.